There was a time when I believed success meant finally reaching a place where nobody could look down on me anymore. I thought success meant having enough money that nobody could question my choices. I thought success meant walking into any room and knowing everyone there respected me. But after everything I had experienced, I learned something much deeper. Success is not about proving people wrong. Success is about becoming the person you always knew you could be. And as I entered this new chapter of my life, I realized something important. The greatest reward was not the business deals. It was not the recognition. It was not even seeing people who once doubted me finally acknowledge my worth. The greatest reward was peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting for acceptance. I wasn't trying to convince anyone that I mattered. I had finally reached a place where I knew my value. And that changed everything. After the Whitmore development project became successful, my company continued growing. New opportunities came. New partnerships came. People who had never returned my calls before suddenly wanted meetings. They wanted advice. They wanted to understand how I built something from nothing. But every time someone asked me about my success, I always thought about the beginning. The small apartment, the old car, the long nights, the moments when I wondered if my hard work would ever pay off. Because the truth is, nobody sees the foundation of success. They only see the building. They see the finished product. They see the confidence. They see the results. But they don't see the sacrifices that created it. My relationship with Tasha also entered a new season. For a long time, there had been a distance between us. Not because we stopped loving each other, but because we allowed outside voices to become louder than our own. Her family's opinions, their expectations, their definition of success. All those things slowly created a space between us. But we were finally learning how to find our way back. Marriage is not about two perfect people. It's about two people willing to grow, willing to admit when they are wrong, willing to choose each other even when things become difficult. And Tasha was doing that. She was no longer the woman who stayed quiet because she feared disappointing her family. She was becoming the woman who understood that love required courage. One evening, we sat together at home. No business discussions. No family problems, just us. She looked at me and said something I would never forget. "Jamal, I spent so much time worrying about whether my family would accept you." She paused. "But I should have been making sure you knew you were accepted by me." Those words meant more than any apology could. Because what I needed from Tasha was never perfection. I needed partnership. Reginald Whitmore also changed in ways I never expected. The man who once measured people by their possessions began measuring them by their character. He started visiting the communities connected to our projects. He started listening. Really listening. The same man who once believed wealth was the greatest sign of success began understanding something different. A person's value is not determined by their bank account. It is determined by what they do with their opportunities. One afternoon, Reginald and I sat in his office. Years earlier, that room would have made me uncomfortable. I would have felt like I had to prove myself. But that day, I sat there as an equal. Reginald looked out the window. "You know something, Jamal?" "What?" "I spent most of my life trying to build a legacy. I listened, but I was measuring the wrong things." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He smiled slightly. "I thought a legacy was buildings, companies, and money." He paused. "But a legacy is the people you impact." That was something I understood. Because that was the reason I started everything. Marcus Whitmore's transformation was probably the one that surprised me the most. Because pride is difficult to overcome, especially when someone has spent their entire life believing they are above others. But Marcus was changing. Slowly. Not perfectly, but genuinely. He started asking questions instead of making assumptions. He started listening before responding. He started recognizing talent instead of judging backgrounds. One day, he said something that showed me how far he had come. "I spent years thinking you were lucky." I smiled. "Lucky?" He nodded. "I thought people just gave you opportunities." I waited. "But now I understand." "Understand what?" He looked at me. "You created opportunities because you refused to quit." That was the difference. Marcus had always seen the results, but now he finally understood the journey. Looking back, I realized something about the Whitmore family. They were never bad people. They were people who had been blinded by their own beliefs. They had spent so much time protecting their image that they forgot the importance of humility. They had been so focused on finding people who looked successful that they missed people who were actually valuable. And maybe that was the biggest lesson. Sometimes the people who hurt us are not always trying to destroy us. Sometimes they are simply people who have not learned yet. And sometimes life gives them an opportunity to learn. But even though things were better, I knew one thing. A repaired relationship does not mean the past disappears. The memories remain. The lessons remain. And sometimes, the hardest moments are the ones that come after everything seems peaceful. Because when life becomes comfortable, people sometimes forget the lessons that brought them there. And the Whitmore family was about to face a situation that would reveal whether their change was real. Because forgiveness can be given, trust can be rebuilt. But character is tested when nobody is watching. And soon, all of us would discover exactly how much we had changed. There is something about the past that most people don't understand. You can move forward. You can grow. You can become a completely different person. But sometimes, the past still finds a way to remind you where you came from. Not because you are meant to stay there, but because some lessons are too important to forget. For me, that reminder came on a quiet Monday morning. I was sitting in my office reviewing the next phase of my company when my assistant walked in. "Jamal, there is someone here to see you." I looked up. "Who is it?" She hesitated. "She says her name is Angela Brooks." The name didn't immediately mean anything to me. Did she say why she wants to meet? My assistant looked at the note in her hand. She said it is about something from years ago. Something from years ago. Those words caught my attention, because I had learned that when someone comes from your past, they rarely come without a reason. Angela was someone I had known before my success, before the business, before the recognition, before people started seeing me differently. She was connected to one of the first property projects I worked on, when I was still trying to build my career. Back then, I was not important. I wasn't someone people wanted to meet. I was just a man trying to prove that my ideas had value. Angela had seen that version of me, the version nobody celebrated, the version nobody noticed. When she entered my office, I immediately recognized her. She smiled. "Jamal Bennett." I stood up. "Angela." We shook hands. She looked around my office. "I heard you became successful." I smiled. "I've been fortunate," she laughed softly. "You still talk the same way." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "You always refuse to take credit." That statement took me back. Because years ago, I was constantly fighting to be recognized, but I was also learning something important. The person you become during the struggle matters more than the rewards after. Angela sat down. For a few moments we talked about the past. She reminded me of things I had forgotten. Times when I stayed late working on plans. Times when I visited neighborhoods nobody wanted to invest in. Times when people told me my ideas were unrealistic. "You know what I remember about you?" she asked. "What?" "You weren't the most experienced person in the room." I laughed. "That's true, but you cared the most." That meant something. Because sometimes people think success comes from being the smartest person, the richest person, the person with the most connections. But sometimes success comes from simply caring enough to keep going. Then Angela told me why she came, and suddenly, the past became connected to the present. She worked with a community organization that helped families who struggled with housing. They were facing a difficult situation. A large number of families were about to lose their homes because of rising costs. She wanted to know if I could help. Years ago, I would have seen a request like that as impossible. I would have looked at my resources and wondered if I was capable. But life had changed me. Now I looked at the situation differently. I didn't ask, "How much can I gain?" I asked, "How many people can I help?" When I told Tasha about the meeting, she smiled. "This sounds like something you would do." I laughed. "What does that mean?" She sat beside me. "Even when you had nothing, you were always trying to help someone else." I thought about that. Maybe she was right. Because success had never changed who I was. It only gave me more ability to act on the things I already believed. But there was another reason this situation mattered. The organization Angela represented was located near one of the areas where the Whitmore family had struggled with their previous development plans. The same communities they once failed to understand. The same people they once viewed only as numbers. Now they had an opportunity to do things differently. I called Reginald. When he answered, I could hear the surprise in his voice. "Jamal, everything okay?" "Yes." I explained the situation. For a moment, he was silent. Then he said something unexpected. "We should help." I smiled. Because years ago, that would not have been his response. Years ago, he would have asked about profit. He would have asked about reputation. He would have asked what the benefit was. But now, his first thought was the people. Marcus also became involved. At first, I expected resistance. Old habits are difficult to break. But Marcus surprised me. "I want to be part of this." I looked at him. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I need to understand the communities we serve." That sentence showed me how much he had changed. The old Marcus would have walked into a room expecting people to adjust to him. The new Marcus was willing to adjust himself. The project began slowly. There were meetings, discussions, challenges. Not everyone trusted us immediately. And honestly, I understood why. Trust is not rebuilt by making promises. It is rebuilt by consistent actions. For years, many people had heard promises from powerful people. They had heard speeches, they had heard plans, but they had not always seen results. So we focused on showing up, listening, following through. One evening, after a long community meeting, I stood outside watching families leave. Tasha walked beside me. "You look tired." I smiled. "I am. But you're happy." I looked at the people around us. "Yeah." She asked, "Why?" I thought about it. Then I answered, "Because this is why everything happened." She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "The struggles, the rejection, the difficult years." I paused. Maybe they weren't just about me becoming successful. They were preparing me to help someone else. But while we were focused on helping others, a new challenge was quietly approaching. A decision made years ago by someone connected to the Whitmore family was about to come back. And this time, it threatened not just a business. It threatened the trust we had worked so hard to rebuild. Because sometimes the past does not return to punish you. Sometimes it returns to reveal what still needs to be healed. People often believe the hardest battles are the ones fought against other people. But as I got older, I realized something. The hardest battles are usually the ones we fight within ourselves. Because facing another person's criticism is one thing. Facing the truth about your own mistakes is something completely different. And Marcus Whitmore was about to face that truth. For years, Marcus had built his identity around being successful. He was the son of Reginald Whitmore, the man who was expected to take over the family legacy, the man people admired, the man who walked into every room believing he belonged there. But underneath all that confidence was something I didn't understand at first: fear. Marcus wasn't arrogant because he believed he was better than everyone else. He was arrogant because he was afraid of becoming ordinary. He was afraid that without the Whitmore name, without the money, without the image, people might not see him. And that fear had caused him to judge people like me. The situation with the community project brought out a different side of Marcus. For the first time, he was working directly with people who did not care about his last name. They didn't care about his expensive clothes. They didn't care about the company he represented. They cared about whether he would keep his promises, and that was something new for him. One afternoon, we visited a neighborhood center where families were discussing their housing concerns. Marcus walked in expecting a normal business meeting, but it wasn't. People challenged him. They asked difficult questions. They questioned decisions. They wanted answers. At first, I saw the old Marcus returning, the defensive attitude, the need to explain himself. But then something changed. He stopped talking, and he started listening. After the meeting, we walked back to the car. Marcus was quiet. I looked at him. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah." But I knew something was bothering him. Finally, he said, "I understand now." I looked at him. "Understand what?" "Why people didn't trust us." I didn't say anything. He continued. "We always thought people should be grateful because we were investing in their communities." He shook his head. "But we never asked what they actually needed." That was a powerful realization. Because true leadership is not about walking into a room expecting people to follow you. It is about understanding the people you are responsible for. A few days later, Marcus asked me to meet him. When I arrived, he was sitting alone in his office. No expensive celebration, no confidence, just Marcus. "I've been thinking about something," he said. I sat down. "What?" He looked at me. The first time you came to the Whitmore mansion, I remembered. The dinner, the judgment, the uncomfortable conversations. I remember how I treated you. I stayed quiet. I made jokes about your car. He looked down. I questioned whether you were good enough for Tasha. His voice became softer. I acted like I was better than you. Those words were difficult for him. Not because he didn't know they were true, but because admitting them meant accepting a part of himself he didn't like. I want you to know something, Jamal. I looked at him. You didn't prove me wrong because you became successful. He paused. You proved me wrong because you were a good person before you ever had success. That statement stayed with me because he finally understood something. My worth was never created by my achievements. My achievements only revealed what was already there. Marcus told me something else that day, something I never expected. My whole life I thought my father was proud of me because I was successful. I listened, but now I realize I was chasing something that wasn't really about him. He looked through the office window. I was trying to prove I deserved everything I had. I understood that feeling. Because everyone has moments where they question themselves. The difference is what we do with those feelings. Some people let insecurity control them. Others use it as a reason to grow. When Marcus returned home that evening, he had a conversation with Reginald. I wasn't there. But later, Reginald told me about it. Marcus finally admitted something his father had never heard before. I was wrong about Jamal. Reginald looked at him. That wasn't easy for you to say. Marcus smiled. No. A pause. But it was necessary. That was the moment I realized Marcus had truly changed. Because growth is not when someone says they are different. Growth is when they are willing to admit who they used to be. Diana also began noticing the change in her husband. For years, she had encouraged Marcus to maintain appearances. She cared deeply about status, about how people viewed them. But watching Marcus become more humble forced her to think differently. One evening, she told him, "You seem happier." Marcus looked surprised. Happier? She nodded. Before, you were always trying to prove something. He smiled. And now? Now you seem like yourself. That was something Marcus had been missing. He had spent so much time building an image that he forgot to build himself. Watching Marcus change taught me something important. People can change. Not everyone will. Some people hold on to pride forever. Some people refuse to admit when they are wrong. But some people, when life gives them the right lesson, they become better. Marcus was not becoming a different person. He was becoming the person he should have been all along. But while Marcus was facing his past, another challenge was approaching. A secret from the early days of the Whitmore business was about to come to light. A decision made years ago. A decision that could change how everyone viewed the family. And this time, it wasn't just about money. It was about honesty. Because every family has things they hide. But eventually, the truth always asks to be heard. There are moments in life when an apology is just a collection of words. And then there are moments when an apology carries years of regret, pain, and understanding. I had received apologies before. Some people apologized because they were uncomfortable with what they had done. Some apologized because they wanted forgiveness without accepting responsibility. But a real apology is different. A real apology does not make excuses. It does not try to explain away the damage. It simply acknowledges the truth. And after everything that happened with the Whitmore family, I never expected one particular apology. Not from Elaine Whitmore. For years, Elaine had been the quietest person in the room. Unlike Marcus, she rarely said things directly. She didn't need to. Her expressions said enough. Her silence said enough. The way she looked at situations said enough. During that first dinner at the Whitmore mansion, I noticed it. She was polite. She smiled. She welcomed me. But I could feel that she was measuring me. She was looking at my clothes, my background, my career. She was trying to understand whether I fit into their world. And at that time, I didn't. Not according to their standards. But over the years, Elaine began seeing something different. She saw me working. She saw me treat people with respect. She saw me remain humble even when success came. And slowly the image she had created of me started falling apart. Because she realized she had never really known me. She had only known her assumptions about me. The conversation happened unexpectedly. I was at the Whitmore mansion for a family dinner. Something that once would have felt impossible. The same house where I once felt like an outsider had become a place where we could sit together honestly. After everyone finished eating, Elaine asked if she could speak with me privately. I followed her into the living room. For a moment, she just stood there quietly. Then she said, "Jamal, I owe you something." I knew immediately what she meant, but I let her continue. "I owe you an apology." Those words surprised me, because Elaine was someone who carried herself with a lot of pride. She was a woman who valued dignity. Admitting she was wrong was not easy. She sat down. I spent years thinking I was protecting my daughter. I listened. I thought I knew what kind of man Tasha needed. She looked at me. But I was looking at the wrong things. The room was quiet. I looked at your circumstances instead of your character. That sentence was powerful, because that was the exact thing that hurt the most. Not that they noticed I had less, but that they believed having less meant I was less. Elaine continued. I remember that first dinner. I looked at her. I remember how uncomfortable you were. I nodded slightly. I remember how uncomfortable you were. She paused. And I remember that you still treated everyone with respect. Her eyes became emotional. I don't know if I could have done that. That was something I appreciated. Because she wasn't trying to make herself look better. She was acknowledging that she saw strength in me before she understood it. I told her something important. Mrs. Whitmore, I won't pretend those moments didn't hurt. She nodded. I know. But I also learned something. What? Sometimes people judge what they don't understand. She looked at me. And sometimes people need time to learn. A small smile appeared on her face. You're more forgiving than I deserve. I shook my head. I just don't want the pain I experienced to change who I am. Later that evening, I watched Elaine sit with Tasha. They talked for a long time, and I realized something. The entire family had been changing. Not because I forced them, not because I demanded apologies, but because life had shown them something they couldn't ignore. Character speaks louder than wealth. Humility speaks louder than status. And kindness has a way of revealing itself. But the biggest surprise came from Diana. For years, Diana had been the person who cared most about appearances. She was competitive, she wanted the best clothes, the biggest events, the most impressive lifestyle. During that first dinner, she had made comments that stayed with me. Comments about my career, my finances, my position in the family. But after everything that happened, she approached me, and I could tell something was different. Jamal. I turned around. Yes, Diana? She looked uncomfortable, almost nervous. I've been thinking about something. I waited. I owe you an apology too. I didn't expect that, she continued. I thought being successful meant being above other people. She looked down. And I was wrong. That was a difficult thing for Diana to admit, because her entire identity had been built around comparison. But now she understood. I judged you because I was afraid. I looked at her. Afraid? She nodded. Afraid that someone without what we had could still become someone greater. That honesty surprised me, because sometimes people's cruelty comes from insecurity they never admit. Diana had spent years trying to prove she belonged among wealthy people, and in doing so, she forgot the importance of treating people well. I accepted her apology. Not because the past disappeared, not because everything suddenly became perfect, but because forgiveness gave all of us the chance to move forward. And that night, something changed. The Whitmore family was no longer just a family I married into. They were people who had learned, people who had grown, people who finally understood the lesson life had been trying to teach them. But there was still one person who had a final lesson ahead. Reginald Whitmore. The man who built an empire. The man who believed he understood success. The man who had spent decades measuring life through achievements. He was about to make a decision that would reveal the kind of man he had truly become. Because the greatest test of change is not admitting your mistakes. It is what you do after admitting them. Life has a way of bringing people to moments where they have to choose. Not the easy choices. Not the choices that make everyone happy. The choices that reveal who they truly are. For years, Tasha Whitmore had been caught between two worlds. The world she was born into, and the world she chose. She was raised in a family where success was measured by achievements, where names mattered, where appearances mattered, where people often looked at what someone had before deciding who they were. But then she met me, a man who had very little compared to her family, a man without their connections, without their wealth, without their last name, but a man who showed her something she had never seen before, a different definition of success. When Tasha and I first got married, I believed love would automatically make everything easier. I was wrong. Love is powerful, but love does not erase differences. It does not automatically remove outside pressure. It does not stop people from having opinions. And for years, Tasha struggled with that. She loved me. I knew that. But there were moments when I felt like she was afraid to stand completely beside me. Afraid of disappointing her family, afraid of losing their approval, and that hurt more than anything they ever said. Because when strangers doubt you, you can walk away. But when the person you love hesitates, that pain feels different. Over time, I watched Tasha change. Not overnight. Not because someone forced her, but because she finally understood something important. A marriage cannot survive when one person is constantly trying to please everyone else. Eventually, someone gets hurt. And in our case, that person was me. One evening, Tasha asked me to sit with her. There was something serious on her mind. I've been thinking about everything. I looked at her. About what? She took a deep breath. About us. I became quiet. Because those words can mean many things. Sometimes they mean something is ending. Sometimes they mean something needs to change. But I waited. I spent years trying to make everyone comfortable. She looked down. My parents, my brother, everyone around me. She paused. But I didn't realize I was making you carry the weight of that. I listened. Because I knew this conversation was important. I should have defended you more. Those words were difficult for her to say. Not because she didn't believe them, but because accepting them meant admitting she had failed me in some moments. I told her something. Tasha, I never needed you to fight every battle for me. She looked at me. I needed you to believe in me. Her eyes became emotional. And I do. I know you do now. I held her hand. But there were times when I didn't feel it. She nodded. I know. That honesty meant everything. Because healing does not begin with pretending nothing happened. Healing begins when people are brave enough to face what did happen. A few weeks later, Tasha faced one of the biggest decisions of her life. Her father wanted her to take a larger role in the Whitmore family business. It was an opportunity many people would dream about. A powerful position, a respected title, a place in the company she grew up around. But there was something else. Tasha had also started building her own path. She had developed a passion for community programs, helping families, supporting women trying to rebuild their lives, something that reminded me of who she truly was. When she told Reginald about her decision, he was surprised. You don't want the position? Tasha shook her head. I want to help the company. Reginald looked confused. Then why turn it down? She smiled. Because I don't want to be known as Reginald Whitmore's daughter. She paused. I want to be known as Tasha Whitmore. That moment showed how much she had changed. For years, she had been living under expectations. Now she was choosing her own identity. Reginald looked at her quietly. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled. Because he understood. Years ago, he wanted everyone in his family to follow a certain path. But now he realized something. A person's life cannot be controlled like a business plan. People need room to become who they are. I am proud of you, he told her. And I knew those words meant everything to Tasha. Because for years, she had wanted her father's approval. But now she had something even more valuable. Her own confidence. When Tasha came home that night, she looked peaceful. I noticed immediately. You made your decision, she smiled. Yes. Are you happy? She nodded. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because that was what I always wanted for her. Not for her to choose me over her family, but for her to choose herself. Looking back, I realized something about love. Real love does not mean someone gives up who they are for you. Real love means two people become stronger together. Tasha didn't need to leave her family behind. She didn't need to reject where she came from. She simply needed to understand that her worth was not determined by their approval. And that lesson changed everything. But while Tasha was finding her own voice, Reginald Whitmore was preparing to make a decision that would affect the future of his entire family. A decision about his company, his legacy, and the people who would come after him. Because after building an empire for decades, Reginald had finally realized something. A legacy is not what you leave behind. A legacy is what you teach people while you are still here. People often think a legacy is something you create at the end of your life. They imagine a person standing in front of a building with their name on it. They imagine awards, recognition, a long list of achievements. But I learned something different. A legacy is not measured by how many people know your name. It is measured by how many lives are better because you existed. And that was something I never forgot. Because I knew what it felt like to be overlooked. I knew what it felt like to walk into rooms where people judged me before they knew me. I knew what it felt like when people saw my circumstances before they saw my character. That experience shaped me. It became the reason I built my company differently. The reason I treated people differently. The reason I never wanted success to change who I was. Years after the Whitmore project became successful, my company had grown beyond anything I imagined. We expanded into more communities. We created more opportunities. We hired more people. But the thing I was most proud of was not the size of the company, it was the culture. I wanted everyone who worked with me to understand one thing. A person's background does not determine their future. A person's current situation does not define their potential. Because I had lived that truth. One morning, I walked through one of our newest developments. Families were moving into their homes. Children were playing outside. Small businesses were opening. People were building lives. I stood there watching everything happen. And I thought about the younger version of myself, the man who struggled to pay bills, the man who wondered if his dreams were unrealistic, the man who sat quietly at the Whitmore dinner table, feeling like he didn't belong. I wished I could go back and tell him something. I would tell him, keep going. Your circumstances are temporary. Your character will carry you further than your situation. The Whitmore family also changed the way they approached business. Reginald became more intentional. He started mentoring younger entrepreneurs, especially people who reminded him of the person I used to be. People with ideas, people with ambition, people without the connections others believed they needed. Paused. One day I asked him why he was doing it. He smiled. I spent most of my life looking for people who already had everything. He paused. Now I want to find people who have potential. That answer showed me how much he had changed. Marcus became one of the biggest supporters of my vision. The same person who once questioned whether I belonged in his family became someone who defended my work. During a business meeting, someone questioned my approach. They said, Jamal's methods are different from traditional development. Before I could respond, Marcus spoke. That's exactly why they work. Everyone looked at him. He continued. For years, we did things because that was how they had always been done. He looked at me. Jamal showed us that success requires understanding people, not just numbers. Hearing Marcus say that was powerful, because I knew how far he had come. Diana also found her own transformation. She began using her influence differently. The woman who once cared mostly about appearances started supporting programs for young women. She organized events. She created opportunities. She became someone who encouraged others, instead of comparing herself to them. And I realized something. Sometimes people don't need someone to destroy their confidence. They need someone to show them a better way. But the biggest change was within our family. The Whitmore mansion, which once felt like a place where I had to prove myself, became a place where we gathered together. Not because we had to, because we wanted to. There were still disagreements, still different opinions, because every family has those things. But the difference was how we handled them. We listened. We respected each other. We remembered that love mattered more than pride. One evening, Reginald invited everyone over for dinner. The same dining room where years earlier I had felt judged. The same table where I once questioned whether I was good enough. But this time, something was different. Reginald stood up. Everyone became quiet. I want to say something. He looked around the table. This family has made mistakes. Nobody interrupted. We have judged people based on things that don't truly matter. He looked at me, and some of us almost lost something valuable because we were too focused on appearances. I knew what he meant. Reginald continued. Jamal, I want you to know something. I looked at him. When you first came into this family, I thought you needed to prove yourself. He smiled sadly. But the truth is, we were the ones who needed to learn. The room became emotional. Because those words represented years of growth, years of change, years of understanding. I looked around that table. The people who once made me feel like an outsider were now people who understood me. But more importantly, I understood them. Because everyone has a journey. Everyone has things they need to learn. Everyone has moments where they must choose between pride and growth. And the Whitmore family had chosen growth. That night, when I left the mansion, I didn't think about the past with anger. I thought about it with gratitude. Not because the pain was enjoyable, not because I would want to experience it again, but because those moments helped shape me. They taught me patience. They taught me resilience. They taught me the importance of staying true to myself. I used to think my greatest achievement would be proving people wrong, but I was wrong. My greatest achievement was proving myself right. I always knew that character mattered. I always knew kindness mattered. I always knew that a person's value could never be measured by their wealth. And now, my life was proof. But every legacy eventually faces one final question. Not how much did you build, not how much did you earn. The real question is, what happens when you are no longer there? Because true success is not only about what you create, it is about what continues after you. And that was the final lesson I was about to learn. The older I became, the more I realized that life does not only measure what you achieve, it measures what you learn. Because a person can have everything the world admires and still miss the most important lessons. They can have money, they can have influence, they can have a respected name. But if they never learn humility, compassion, and understanding, they are still missing something valuable. The Whitmore family had spent decades building an empire, but the greatest thing they built was not a company, it was the ability to change. A few years after everything happened, Reginald invited me to his office. When I arrived, I noticed something different. The office looked the same. The expensive furniture, the large windows, the city view. But Reginald himself seemed different. There was a calmness about him, a peace I had never seen before. He wasn't the man desperately trying to protect his image anymore. He was simply Reginald, a father, a husband, a man who had learned from his mistakes. "Jamal," he said. "Yes, sir?" He smiled. "You still call me sir." I laughed. "Old habits." He nodded. "I suppose some things don't change." He walked toward the window. For a moment, he just looked outside. "You know, when I was your age, I thought success was about getting ahead of everyone else. I listened. I thought if you weren't winning, you were losing." He paused. "But now I understand something." "What?" "Life was never a competition." I looked at him. He continued. "The people I thought were behind me were often the people teaching me the most." Those words showed how far he had come. Because years earlier, Reginald believed his position gave him authority over others. Now he understood that every person had something valuable to offer. Reginald told me about a decision he had made. He wanted to create a foundation under the Whitmore name. Not a foundation designed to make the family look generous, but one focused on creating real opportunities, scholarships, business support, housing assistance, career programs, especially for people who had talent but lacked access. When he explained the idea, I smiled, because I knew exactly why it mattered to him. He was trying to correct something, not erase the past, but create a better future. "I spent many years opening doors for people who already had keys," he said. I smiled. "That's a powerful way to put it." He nodded. "Now I want to help people who are standing outside wondering if the door will ever open." That sentence stayed with me, because that was once me, standing outside, waiting for someone to believe in me. Marcus also became involved with the foundation, and seeing that transformation was something I never expected. The same man who once believed people needed to prove their worth to him was now fighting to give people opportunities. One day, we attended an event together. A young entrepreneur came to speak with Marcus. The young man was nervous. He had a business idea, but lacked confidence. Years earlier, Marcus might have dismissed him, but this time, Marcus listened. He asked questions. He encouraged him. After the conversation, I looked at Marcus. "You know you would have handled that differently years ago." He laughed. "I know. What changed?" He looked at me. I finally understood that helping someone rise doesn't make you smaller. That was a lesson many people struggle with. Some people believe another person's success threatens their own. But the truth is different. Someone else's light does not make yours darker. Tasha continued building her own path as well. She became deeply involved in community programs. She worked with women who were rebuilding their lives after difficult situations. And watching her work reminded me of the woman I first fell in love with. Not the woman surrounded by wealth, not the woman trying to satisfy expectations, but the woman with compassion, the woman who cared, the woman who wanted to make a difference. One afternoon, Tasha and I visited one of the community centers she supported. We watched families receiving assistance, children participating in programs, people learning new skills. She looked around and smiled. I never imagined this would be my life. I looked at her. Why? Because I spent so much time thinking success meant becoming someone important. She looked at the people around us. Now I realize success means becoming someone useful. That was one of the most meaningful things she had ever said. The Whitmore family's greatest lesson was not about money. It was about perspective. They learned that wealth without compassion creates distance. Power without humility creates loneliness. And success without purpose feels empty. They had spent years trying to protect a family image. But eventually, they learned that the strongest families are not the ones that look perfect. They are the ones willing to admit their mistakes. The ones willing to grow. The ones willing to love beyond pride. Looking back, I often thought about the first night I entered the Whitmore mansion. I was nervous. I was uncomfortable. I felt like I didn't belong. But now, I understood something. Maybe I was never meant to fit into their world. Maybe we were all meant to create a better one together. A world where people were judged by their actions, not their possessions. A world where character mattered more than status. But even after all these changes, one final challenge remained. Because life has a way of asking one last question. After everything you have learned, will you hold on to the lesson? Or will you return to who you used to be? And the Whitmore family was about to face the final moment that would reveal whether their transformation was truly complete. Sometimes the greatest misunderstandings in life happen because people only see a small part of the story. They see where someone is standing, but they don't see how far that person has traveled. They see what someone has today, but they don't see what that person had to overcome to get there. And that was the biggest mistake the Whitmore family made when they first met me. They saw the man standing in front of them. They saw my old car. They saw my simple clothes. They saw my small beginnings. But they didn't see the person behind those things. They didn't see the years of sacrifice. They didn't see the nights I stayed awake, trying to figure out my next step. They didn't see the moments when giving up would have been easier than continuing. They didn't see Jamal Bennett. They only saw what they believed I was. Years later, everything had changed. But sometimes, I still thought about that younger version of myself. The man who walked into that mansion trying his best to make a good impression. The man who wanted Tasha's family to understand that he loved her. The man who sat there quietly while people questioned whether he was good enough. Back then, I thought I needed to convince them. I thought I needed to prove my value. But I eventually learned something important. You cannot force someone to recognize your worth. Sometimes, you have to continue becoming who you are meant to be. And eventually, the truth speaks for itself. One evening, I attended a Whitmore family gathering. It was different from the first one. There was no tension, no judgment, no feeling that I had to carefully choose every word. People laughed, they shared stories, they talked about life, and for a moment, I realized how much had changed. But then Reginald said something that caught everyone's attention. I want everyone here to hear something. The room became quiet. He looked at me. Jamal changed this family. I immediately shook my head. No, Mr. Whitmore. He raised his hand. Let me finish. Everyone listened. When Jamal first came into our lives, we made a mistake. He looked around the room. We thought we were the ones who had something to teach him. He paused. But the truth is, he taught us. Nobody spoke. He taught us that success is not about looking important. It is about being valuable. He taught us that leadership is not about controlling people. It is about serving them. And most importantly, he looked at me. He taught us that a person's beginning does not determine their ending. Those words meant something. Because years ago, those same people doubted my beginning. Now they respected my journey. After dinner, Marcus and I stood outside talking. The Atlanta night surrounded us. The same city where I once struggled. The same city where I built everything. Marcus smiled. You know something? What? I used to think you were the lucky one. I laughed. Lucky? He nodded. Yeah, I thought you somehow got opportunities that people like us wanted. I looked at him. And now? He smiled. Now I realize you created opportunities because you refused to let your circumstances define you. That was one of the biggest compliments Marcus had ever given me. Because it came from understanding, not competition. Marcus admitted something else. I think I was afraid of people like you. I looked surprised. People like me? He nodded. People who had nothing to lose. I listened. When you grow up with everything, sometimes you become afraid of losing it. That was honest. Marcus had spent years protecting a life he inherited. I had spent years building one. Those were two completely different experiences. Diana also approached me later that night. She looked around the room. I never imagined this would happen. I smiled. What? That we would all be sitting here like this? I understood. Because none of us expected this ending. The people who once judged each other were now learning from each other. The people who once focused on differences were now appreciating them. But the person who changed the most was Reginald. Before meeting me, he believed providing wealth was the same as providing wisdom. He believed giving people opportunities was enough. But he learned something important. People don't only need opportunities. They need belief. They need someone who sees potential before the results appear. Because everyone who becomes successful was once someone nobody recognized. That lesson became something I carried into my own company. Whenever a young employee came to me with an idea, I remembered my younger self. Whenever someone lacked confidence, I remembered the moments when I lacked confidence. Whenever someone was judged because of where they came from, I remembered how that felt. And I made sure they had something I once needed. Someone who believed in them. Years after everything happened, a young man working with my company came into my office. He was nervous. He had an idea for improving one of our projects. At first, he apologized. I know this might not be important. I stopped him. Why would you say that? He looked down. Because I'm still new here. I smiled. That doesn't mean your ideas don't matter. He looked surprised. And I told him something I wished someone had told me years earlier. Never confuse your current position with your future potential. That became one of the greatest lessons of my life. The person people overlook today may be the person everyone respects tomorrow. The person people underestimate today may be the person solving problems tomorrow. The person standing quietly in the corner may be carrying ideas that can change everything. The Whitmore family failed to see that when they first met me. But thankfully, they were willing to learn. Still, every journey has a final chapter. And after everything we experienced, after the struggles, after the misunderstandings, after the growth, there was one final thing left. The lesson that would define everything we had built. Because at the end of the day, success is not about what people remember you owned. It is about what people remember you gave. For most of my life, I chased success without fully understanding what it meant. When I was younger, I thought success was a destination, a place I would finally reach where everything would become easier. I thought once I earned enough money, people would respect me. I thought once I built something impressive, nobody would question me again. I thought once I had everything I dreamed about, I would finally feel complete. But life has a way of teaching you that some of the things you chase are not the things that truly matter. Because when I finally reached the place I had worked so hard for, I discovered something unexpected. The things that mattered most were the things money could never buy. I remember sitting in my office one evening after everyone had gone home. The building was quiet. The city lights filled the windows. Years earlier, I would have looked at that view and thought, one day, I want this. And now I had it. The company, the respect, the opportunities, everything I once imagined. But instead of feeling like I had finally arrived, I found myself thinking about the journey, the people who helped me, the people who doubted me, the moments that tested me, the moments that shaped me. And I realized something. The struggle was not something I needed to erase. The struggle was part of my story. People often talk about success as if it is only the result. They celebrate the person who wins. They admire the person who succeeds. But they rarely talk about the person before the success. The person who failed. The person who struggled. The person who kept trying when nobody was watching. That person deserves respect too. Because success is not created during the celebration. It is created during the difficult moments. The moments when you have every reason to quit, but you decide not to. One of the biggest lessons I learned was that success changes your responsibilities. When I had very little, I focused on surviving. I focused on paying bills. I focused on creating opportunities for myself. But when I gained more, my responsibility became bigger. It was no longer just about my future. It was about the people connected to me, the employees who depended on the company, the families who benefited from our projects, the communities that trusted our promises. Success gave me influence, and influence requires responsibility. Reginald understood this lesson too. A man who once spent years building an empire eventually realized that an empire without purpose means very little. One day, he and I sat together discussing the future. He looked at me and said, "Jamal, I spent my whole life trying to build something people would remember." I asked, "And now?" He smiled. "Now I want to build something that helps people remember what matters." That was a different man from the one I first met. The old Reginald wanted recognition. The new Reginald wanted impact. Marcus also discovered his own meaning of success. For years, he believed success meant being ahead of everyone else, having the biggest house, the best car, the most impressive title. But eventually, he learned that comparison steals happiness, because there will always be someone with more money, more influence, more achievements. If your happiness depends on being above someone else, you will never truly be satisfied. Marcus found peace when he stopped competing and started contributing. Tasha and I also continued growing together. Our marriage was not perfect. No marriage is. We still had disagreements. We still had difficult conversations. But we learned something valuable. A strong relationship is not built by avoiding problems. It is built by facing them together. We had survived moments that could have broken us. The pressure, the family conflicts, the misunderstandings. But those challenges taught us how to communicate better, how to appreciate each other more, how to protect what we built. Years later, I visited the same neighborhood where I first started my career. I walked through the streets quietly. Nobody recognized me. And honestly, I liked it because that place reminded me of something. Before anyone knew my name, before anyone respected my work, before anyone believed in my vision, I was still valuable. My worth existed before my success. And that was something I wished more people understood. Your circumstances may describe where you are. They do not define who you are. During a speech at one of our community events, I shared something I had learned. I told the audience, "Don't spend your entire life trying to prove that you are worthy. Your worth is already there. Your goal should not be to convince people to value you. Your goal should be to become someone who values yourself enough to keep growing." Those words came from experience, because I knew what it felt like to seek approval. I knew what it felt like to wonder if I was enough. But eventually, I learned that the most important person I needed to prove myself to was myself. Looking at everything that happened with the Whitmore family, I realized something. The story was never really about rich people and poor people. It was never about one family being right and another being wrong. It was about people learning, people changing, people understanding that every person carries a story you may not see. The Whitmores saw my circumstances, but they eventually discovered my character. And I saw their mistakes, but I eventually discovered their humanity. The greatest lesson I carried from my journey was simple. Never judge someone's beginning, because you have no idea where their story is going. The person struggling today may become the person leading tomorrow. The person nobody notices today may become the person everyone needs tomorrow. And the person who seems to have everything may still have lessons they need to learn. Everyone is becoming. Everyone is growing. Everyone has a story. As I looked back at my life, I no longer saw the painful moments as things that happened against me. I saw them as moments that prepared me. The rejection taught me resilience. The criticism taught me patience. The struggle taught me compassion. And the success taught me responsibility. Everything had a purpose, even the moments I didn't understand at the time. But every story eventually reaches a final chapter. And for me, that final chapter was not about the company. It was not about the wealth. It was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about understanding the one thing that mattered most. The true measure of a person's life is not what they collect. It is what they leave behind. And that was the final lesson my family was about to learn. Every story has a beginning, a moment where everything changes. A moment where a person steps into the unknown and discovers who they truly are. For me, that moment came years ago when I walked into the Whitmore mansion for the first time. I was a man with dreams, a man with determination, a man who had very little compared to the people sitting across from me. I remember the feeling clearly. The way I looked around that room, the expensive furniture, the confident conversations, the comfort of people who had never questioned whether they belonged. And then there was me, a man who wondered if he would ever be accepted, a man who wondered if love could survive the difference between two worlds. But now, standing years later and looking back at everything that happened, I realized something. That night was not the beginning of my struggle. It was the beginning of my transformation. Life has a strange way of changing our perspective. The things we fear at one point become the things we are grateful for later. The moments that break us sometimes become the moments that build us. And the people who hurt us sometimes become the people who teach us the greatest lessons. I never imagined that the family who once made me question my worth would eventually become the people who understood me the most. I never imagined that the man who once judged me would one day call me family. I never imagined that the person who felt like an outsider would eventually become someone who helped bring everyone together. But life had a different plan. Years after everything began, I attended a special event. It was not a business event. It was not about money. It was not about awards. It was a celebration of the people whose lives had changed because of the work we started. Families who found homes, young people who found opportunities, entrepreneurs who received support, people who once felt forgotten. I stood there watching them speak, and I felt something I had never felt when I first started chasing success. Fulfillment. Because I finally understood. The greatest achievement was never building something big. The greatest achievement was building something meaningful. During the event, Reginald came to stand beside me. For a moment, we just watched the crowd. Then he said, "Do you remember the first time you came to my house?" I smiled. "Yes, I remember too." He paused. "I thought I was judging you." I looked at him. But the truth is, I was revealing myself. That statement surprised me. He continued, "The way we judge others often shows what we value." He looked around. I valued things that didn't matter enough. His honesty showed me how much he had changed. "I thought wealth made someone important," Reginald said. "But you taught me something different." I listened. "Character is what remains when everything else is gone." Those words carried weight. Because Reginald had built an empire. But the thing he was most proud of now was not the empire. It was the person he had become. Marcus also came over. The three of us stood together. Something that once would have seemed impossible. Marcus smiled. "You know, I still can't believe how everything turned out." I laughed. "Neither can I." He looked at me. "Years ago, I thought you were the person who needed to change." He shook his head. "But I was the one who needed to learn." I smiled. That's something we all had to do. And that was the truth. Growth was not just Marcus's journey. It was all of ours. Later that evening, Tasha and I walked through the event together. She looked happy, peaceful, the kind of happiness that does not come from having everything perfect, the kind that comes from knowing you have survived difficult things and become stronger because of them. She held my hand. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I smiled. "Sometimes." "What do you think?" I looked around. "I think every challenge brought us here." She nodded. "Even the painful ones?" "Especially the painful ones. Because without those difficult moments, I may never have discovered my own strength. The Whitmore family may never have learned humility. Marcus may never have changed. Tasha may never have found her voice. And we all may have continued living based on assumptions instead of understanding. Sometimes life allows things to fall apart so something better can be built. Not easier, better. When I think about the young man I used to be, I feel proud, not because he became successful, but because he refused to give up when success seemed impossible. He kept going when nobody was watching. He kept believing when nobody else believed. He kept his kindness even when people gave him reasons to become bitter. And that is the person I am most grateful for. Not the businessman, not the leader, not the person people recognize today. The man who kept moving forward. My journey taught me 3 important lessons. The first, never let someone's opinion become your identity. People will judge you based on what they see, but they don't know your entire story. The second, success without character is empty. Money can create comfort, but only character creates respect. The third, people can change. Not everyone will, but some people will surprise you. Some people will grow. Some people will become better when they finally understand what truly matters. Today, when I look at my life, I don't see a story about rejection. I see a story about growth. I don't see a story about being underestimated. I see a story about discovering my value. I don't see a story about proving people wrong. I see a story about proving myself right. The Whitmore family once looked at me and saw a man who didn't belong. But years later, they saw something different. They saw a husband, a leader, a friend, a person who reminded them that greatness is not inherited. It is built, not with money, not with status, but with courage, with patience, with integrity. And if there is one thing I want people to remember from my story, it is this: never underestimate someone because of where they are starting. A seed does not look like a tree. A dream does not look like success. A person struggling today may be someone changing the world tomorrow. Give people a chance. Give people respect. And most importantly, give yourself the same belief you give to others. Because your beginning does not decide your ending. Your choices do.